All right. Well, good morning. I'm not feeling guilty at all, but that is not a virtual background. That is a real palm tree behind me. I'm sorry about that, but my three boys and I have been taking a little break this week and on the shores of Maui right here, starting off the morning with you guys. But anyways, hey, thanks for jumping in. I think people will be joining as we go along through this. We got a packed agenda, so I'm going to roll right into it. I'm going to start off with the meeting, then Darren Watkins will take over after Rob McCann's presentation, and then he has to drop off at about 10 o'clock because he's going to be involved, I think, in helping with the selection of the new planning director for the city of Spokane. So they're involved with that. So all good stuff. We're rolling forward. I want to, kudos to the group for staying involved and staying motivated. Kudos to Sheldon Jackson for keeping that fire going out there. I don't think the city has looked as good, the downtown core. And I know that's just part of it. But anyways, we'll hear more about it in just a little bit. Just a reminder that you keep it on mute. These are all standard rules here. And then, use chat or questions. So like when Rob's presenting or Darren Watkins will be presenting, please use chat. And if you have an urgent question, you do the raise your hand piece as well. Our goal is to be done in an hour. If the conversation's healthy and robust, we'll keep on rolling. Can't promise to be here. I think I'll be on the beach. But I will keep that conversation going. So really this group, the purpose of it is just like a neighborhood council. We're assisting city agencies in determining priority needs. We've been trying to come up with a tagline for this group that really covers what we're trying to do. This is just up and above. You'll see that quote. It's just something we came up with. It's not, I don't know if it's going to stick or not, but it's pursuing a community where everyone goes to bed in a safe and secure spot. We can talk further about that, but that's one sort of sticking right now. It's really what we're trying to do. We're meeting the second Wednesday of each month at 9 a.m. via Zoom. And then our communication is really email. And if you have Facebook, I would encourage you to jump in on the Spokane commercial business and commercial property owner group page. It's where a lot of activity, conversations going. And then we've had several tools for reporting crime, business tools that are helpful that I believe I can share with you. Spokane Cops has been wonderful. Patrick Stryker has been sharing some information with us and that we can use. And then finally, we're working on this list of recommendations and we're getting there. And we've been talking to a lot of different stakeholder groups that we're working with and excited about trying to come up with, there's more in common out there to solve homelessness or at least attack it and bring it to the point where we come back to pursuing a community where everyone gets a bed in a safe and secure spot. So I'm hopeful, and we're working on that. It's continuing the work in progress. So with that, I want to take an audible. Darren, do you mind introducing Johnny real quickly, and then I'll introduce.
Remember, we had some conversations about some of the programs that worked and we might want to consider here in the city of Spokane. And several of them were from, ironically, San Diego, California, where our guest today, Johnny Perkins, is now the new city administrator and has some considerable experience. So, Johnny, thank you for joining us this morning and welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity as well as the invitation.
I do think we'll aim for like a June, if you're good with it, Johnny, like a June at our June meeting to give you some adequate time. I don't want to cut you out. There's just a lot going on and I know your head's got to be spinning, but we're so excited to have you as part of the team here in Spokane and looking forward to working with you. But if you could aim for June, if that works, would you be good with that?
Sure. Absolutely. I'd like to do a more formal, in-depth presentation, but Chud, if I might, I know you allocated me 5 minutes. If it's okay with you all, if I take just 2 or 3 right now, and then I'll leave, and you can get on with the business of the group. And then I initially my movers were supposed to arrive today with my household from San Diego, but that's been pushed out to Saturday. So that was my confusion on the schedule. So if you don't mind, if I took a couple minutes, if that makes sense, I don't want to disrupt the agenda or the flow of the meet discussion.
No, go right ahead, Johnny.
All right. So I'm just really honored and blessed to be in this position. This is a wonderful city, a beautiful city, a city with a lot of fantastic things going on. I'm fortunate. I have family here. My nephew is the youth pastor at Whitworth Church. He and my niece went to Whitworth University. When I worked for Republic Services, part of my background is in the waste business. I managed 11 Western states, one of them being Washington. And among contracts in Kent, Bellevue, and Seattle, Republic has the contract to dispose of the city's ash from its waste to energy site. And so it was part of that many years ago. Just briefly about myself, as I mentioned, solid waste industry background. Recently at the city of San Diego as a department director, also the deputy chief operating officer, where I handle 3 of the top 5 departments in the city, over 2,500 employees, about $1.5 billion budget. And, here's the irony of everything. Today is actually 30 days into the job. I started April 12th. So Chud, I appreciate the timing with which you and Darren have invited me. 30 days. Who would have thought that? But it's been an amazing 30 days, a lot of things going on. And I just wanted to cover a few things, and then I'll let you get on with the business of the discussion. This certainly isn't San Diego. And I told myself when I got here, we're not going to walk in and say, well, this is the way we did it in San Diego. This is the way we did it here. Every city presents its own unique challenges, and certainly Spokane is among those. But Spokane has so many wonderful things going on that were much better and greater than San Diego. And that's part of the exciting part for me. I will tell you, with the strategies that we had in San Diego, we did reduce homelessness by 50%. And that is, I'm a big analytics guy, and I don't throw out numbers without proof. And we have that. Mayor Faulkner, who was the mayor at the time, we had a very aggressive initiative to combat homelessness. And it's really a partnership. It's not one part of it over the other. It's a partnership with law enforcement, public safety. And it's not from a law enforcement standpoint in terms of that side of it, but it's having law enforcement present to assist when you face situations in encampments, when there's illegal activity, drugs, that kind of thing. You need that present. But it's also the service providers. It's what I call an illegal dumping team, a team that comes in and cleans up all the litter and trash. It's a graffiti team that comes in and does all the graffiti. Not to say that homeless are tagging or doing graffiti, because I don't believe they are, but graffiti is still part of the beautification of our city. And I remember my first day driving in here on April 10. I got off I-90 at Division. I pulled right under the railroad viaduct to get to the Ruby Suites, and there's graffiti all over that. And I said, no, we've got to clean that up. We can't have that. But it also involves community partnerships, community leaders such as commercial property owners, realtors, other leaders in the community. We have to have your buy-in and your support. That's really the only way that we're going to get there. So I'm excited. The mayor's got a wonderful vision. She's got terrific initiatives for both homelessness and housing. And so I'm excited to speak to both of those. And in closing, I just wanted to thank a few people who have been very gracious to me in my time here. I think my second day on the job, Chad, I met you. I met Chris Batten, Sheldon Jackson, Linnell Cadill, and Charlotte Nemec. And I really appreciated that discussion about what was going on downtown as it relates to encampments, some of those illegal activities, and the litter of trash. And as a result of that meeting and you bringing certain things to my attention, I then directed our city staff team to develop what I call a hotspot list. Very critical that you know hotspots. And every day, Monday through Friday, we go through the list of hotspots and make sure that we're addressing what's going on there. So that's the first thing I did right away. And again, I'm still going through the system to kind of see what challenges we have and what things we can do to improve. I also want to thank a group from the Association of Realtors, and Darren Watkins came in early on to meet with me. But yesterday we had a great presentation from Darren, Tom Clark, Eric Johnson, who I'm going to meet with later, and Tom Hormel, who is with the Washington State Board of Association of Realtors. You all know very well. Great conversation. And, we are looking at some serious initiatives. We are looking at things to possibly do a summit, to possibly do a task force, to look at best practices, to really get our arms around some of the funding that's out there for housing, to take advantage of that, to really look at incentivizing a certain area so we can get more building. I mean, I'm not a victim, but I'm kind of caught up in that cycle now in terms of housing inventory. And I want to lastly thank the Bornhoffs, Chris and Marianne. Marianne I met her through another person, and she's been wonderful at helping me understand the housing inventory and market. In fact, I'm renting and leasing from their 35th place there over in 31st East 31st Avenue in South Hill. I'm excited to get moved in there. Wonderful project. But those are the kind of things that we need to be supporting here in the city. Those are the kind of things that we need to be approving. And both homelessness and housing are really two critical issues. And I'm hoping that my experience in partnering with all of you can help get us to where you want to go. So I apologize. I probably went over my 3 minutes, but Chud, I would like to come back. Darren, I would like to come back in June. I'd like to do a formal presentation, maybe a PowerPoint, and kind of really walk through in closing this to let you know exactly precisely where the mayor is going as it relates not just to the homelessness discussion, but also housing, because those are two of the four mayor's top priorities, along with public safety and economic development. So I'm excited. I'm officially now a Spokanean, if you will. Now that I've abandoned, not abandoned, but I've moved out of San Diego. Everything's gone. All the bank accounts are closed. Local bank now. So I'm good to go. Honored and blessed to be here, and look forward to working for all of you, because I do work for you. You are the taxpayers and leaders of this community, and I work for you. So thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. I appreciate it.
Johnny, thank you. Happy 30 days. Spokanite, being an official Spokanite now, and we do look forward to hearing more from you in June. So appreciate you, appreciate your energy, and excited to be working with you. Now we're gonna go back onto script and the agenda. And a little introduction. So Rob McCann is President and CEO of Catholic Charities of Eastern Washington. He oversees a $28 million annual budget, 360 employees. And one of the things that I think is so powerful is 6,300 volunteers. Rob has been with Catholic Charities of Eastern Washington for the past 20 years. I actually had an opportunity to serve with Rob probably right when he came here on a Better Business Bureau board. Rob's son is at Gonzaga Prep with my youngest son. Rob is definitely a Spokanite, and I'm excited to hear from him. I'm going to tell you with my introduction, we always have more in common than we don't. And as we talked, and Rob and I and Jonathan have been talking, there's just so much more in common. And there's perceptions that are out there. There are some realities out there as well. But as we go through this, the conversation is what's going to carry us through it, and as we seek solutions. So Rob, I'm going to kick it over to you. Thanks for joining us today. Jonathan, good seeing you two on here.
Thanks, Chud, and thanks, everyone. I'm going to try and share the screen here. Let's see if this works or not. Hopefully it will. Should go here. So, I appreciate everyone giving me some time. This is a super hard topic. It's often awkward to talk about. It's often scary to talk about. I would just say that there's no wrong questions. There's no question that's too hard for us, for me, and we're always open to a good dialogue. At Catholic Charities, we really just have one very major belief that kind of oversees everything we do. Every human being is made in the image and likeness of God. That's everything we operate depends on that concept. And for us, it's great because it doesn't matter who God is for you. It can be Christ, it can be Yahweh, it can be Buddha, it can be Allah. We serve everybody. It doesn't matter what your religion are. 90% of our clients are non-Catholic, 90% of our staff are non-Catholic. We serve everybody. But we do believe every person deserves dignity and respect, and that's the basis of everything we do. We also believe, from a very basic standpoint, every human being should eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom indoors, which is similar to that tagline Chud just told you about. We've been saying that for many decades around here, and it's the basis of how we look at homelessness. When we talk about the dignity of every human person, we also believe in the dignity of our neighbors and of the downtown community, of the business community, of tourism, retail, restaurants, and not just in Spokane. We're in 13 different counties of Eastern Washington. What we do is in cities all over Eastern Washington. And in fact, what we do is probably not what you think. We cover 13 counties, and for us, 25%, for instance, in Spokane County, 25% of people living at or below the federal poverty line. What that means is they are one lost shift, one broken down car, one unexpected medical bill away from being homeless. they're on the edge of crisis and suffering. That is the group that we are overwhelmingly focused on. And this map kind of shows all the things we do for that group. Our job at Catholic Charities, really the main job is to keep that 25% from being homeless, from being on the street or living in their car in the Walmart parking lot or experiencing that kind of crisis. The work that we do overwhelmingly actually has nothing to do with homelessness and everything to do with homelessness prevention. We serve somewhere between 65 and 70,000 people a year. The majority of them are not in homeless shelters or in our homeless housing. The programs we do is what you see on this map. Senior services, 6,000 drivers give rides to seniors to the doctor, the grocery store, to do chores in their homes, to help them stay in their home. Our childbirth and parenting assistance program, we serve over 4,000 newly parenting and pregnant, usually teens, every year to get maternity support services. Emergency assistance, helping people pay their utility bill, car repairs, back due rent. Our Rising Strong program, where we take in entire families who are about to lose their kids to CPS, and instead they move in with us at the Holy Names Convent, and we provide treatment to the whole family. We have childcare centers, over 260 kids in childcare, so mom and dad can go to work every day. Behavioral health programs, counseling, substance abuse treatment. Regional offices in Walla Walla, Pasco, Pullman, Colville, Othello, Chewelah. We do the Christmas Bureau every year, which most of you know all about with the Spokesman Review. And Food for All, just helping people who are on that razor's edge of poverty get something to eat. And really, that work that you see on this map, it's grown. In my 21 years at Catholic Charities, we've grown a lot. And that's not necessarily a good thing, by the way. It means that there's more and more need. When I started 21 years ago, we had 41 staff and a $3 million a year budget. We now have somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 staff and a $28 million a year budget. And all of that is to serve that 25% of those people in all these communities living on that razor's edge that could become homeless at any moment. And really, these are the programs and the work that we've done for over 109 years. Of that 65,000 that we serve, on any given night, about 1,200 out of that 65,000 on any given night are the folks that are in our shelter or our housing for homeless. And really the focus that we're talking about there, when I say homeless, I think we should be clear with this group what we're really talking about. We're talking about chronic street homelessness for the purposes of today. I think this is the group that is most effective to the downtown core. These are the folks you see pushing a shopping cart and talking to themselves downtown. These are the folks you see in tents or using drugs right on the sidewalk, right in front of people walking by. These are the people that you see going through your dumpsters, making a mess, making litter, human excrement. These are the folks that are very, very mentally ill and suffering with substance abuse disorder. They have medical illnesses and they're not always on their best behavior. And really, these are the folks we're talking about today. These are the folks we see creating camps down by the river. These are the folks, these 20-somethings you see riding around on BMX bikes every summer all around downtown. These are the folks that present the greatest risk to their own human dignity in our community because of how medically ill they are, but they also present the greatest risk to downtown business, retail, restaurant, bars, hotels, tourism, conventions, events, because of the way their illness sometimes makes them make bad decisions. And that 1,200 group, the chronically street homeless group, that's about 1.8% of the total clients that Catholic Charities serves. So it's probably one of the smallest groups that we serve, but yet it's 95% of what I talk about almost every day for the last at least 5 or 6 years anyway, as homelessness has become a big issue. And it's what the community is focused on. Homelessness was the #1 issue in the last mayoral election. And it is actually in towns like Spokane all across the country. That's relatively new. 5 years ago, I was begging for homelessness to be a #1 issue. And now that it is, it's a chance for us to have a dialogue. You know, and keeping that 25% of those people who are living at or below that federal poverty line from going into complete crisis or complete deterioration is really an enormous task. It's required Catholic Charities to pivot, to grow, to take a lot of risks, and to do some building for sure. And we've seen that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. You know, one of the big questions, why is there so much homelessness? This is a reasonable question. It's a legitimate question. We're not going to solve this problem unless we get to the root of that. And so we really have to talk about things like the reality of mental health and addiction issues for people that are really struggling on the streets with that. There's obviously a lack of housing in our community. We've heard all about that for a long time now. If you're a stable couple and you're both employed, you got no bankruptcies, you got no criminal record, no history of drug or alcohol use or abuse, you have a tough time finding an apartment in Spokane, Washington. So if you're working poor, you have an even tougher time because maybe you do have a bankruptcy or something in your credit rating. If you're one of those 25% who are doubled up or tripled up or couch surfing or on the edge of homelessness, it's really hard to find an apartment. And if you are chronically dual diagnosed, which means you have mental illness and substance abuse issues going on at the same time, dual diagnosis, if you're that person and you're a chronically street homeless person, you have zero chance to get an apartment in Spokane, unless, quite frankly, someone like Catholic Charities builds one that only you by law are allowed to move into. And that's an important thing to know about the housing inventory. Rents have gone way up in our community. Homeowner prices, rent prices have gone way up. But really, there's also in our community and in our country, there's a significant income inequality issue that also feeds into people getting lost into this system. And really, the final piece of why there's so much homelessness is because we're not taking care of our kids. You know, adverse childhood experiences happening between birth and age 5, things that should never happen to any child, which cause them to fall behind in school, to be more prone for mental health issues, more prone for abuse issues and substance abuse, to try and self-medicate later on in life. Those are the kids that end up at the House of Charity when they turn 18. And so we have to look at what we're doing with kids as one of the causes of homelessness. Now, we ask the question, how do you end homelessness? I've been saying for 20 years, we're not going to ever end homelessness. As we're having this Zoom right now, someone in Spokane is becoming newly homeless. Someone is fleeing domestic violence. Someone's been kicked out of the place they've been couch surfing. Someone who's been doubled or tripled up has to find a new spot. Someone is always going to be becoming homeless. We can't end homelessness, but we can solve homelessness. And there's a difference. The meaning of solving homelessness, again, goes back to that tagline at the very beginning. Every human being should eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom indoors. We need to start with that. That's the dignity of every person. And that is something that we absolutely can do. When we're serving about 1,200 total on any given night that need shelter or that need some kind of intervention, that's a manageable number. That's something we can accomplish. But as we do that, we also have to stay focused on the dignity of our neighbors and the dignity of business and retail and all those things that happen in the downtown. And so we are always willing to have really hard, uncomfortable conversations and ask hard questions of ourselves about what it means to make sure that we're being respectful of our neighbors and of the downtown business economy in general. And so when we do that, we do ask ourselves hard questions. And I want to talk about some of those. And I also want to let you know that we often take positions that most other social service agencies would consider controversial and radically disagree with as a result of asking ourselves those hard questions. So for some examples, and to talk about what Chud said, which is you'd be surprised at some of the things we might agree on. For instance, we are against panhandling. If you are panhandling and we know you're panhandling, we will not give you lunch at the House of Charity. That's been true for decades. People are shocked when they hear me say, don't ever give money to panhandlers. Been saying that in front of every TV camera I get in front of for a lot of years. We agree completely with a camping ordinance. We don't think anyone should eat, sleep, or go to the bathroom outside. And that's somewhat shocking to some in the social services industry. But we don't think that camping is a good idea. It's not human dignity. It's not respect. It's not compassion. I don't think if someone's got a tent in the Brown Street Viaduct and we've got a bed open in the House of Charity and we invite him to come in and he says, no, you have too many rules there. Really, the rules of the House of Charity is you can't do drugs and drink inside and you can't have sex inside. And if someone says that those two rules are too much for me to want to go inside, I don't think that's a good enough reason to not come inside, quite frankly. And that surprises most people when I say that. We also think the sit and lie ordinance is not a bad idea. People I know are very afraid of the sit and lie ordinance, that it would be misused or abused. And I can tell you that I think we have one of the finest police departments I've ever seen in my life in this community. I have seen police officers who have treated our clients with dignity and respect and compassion and patience that they don't always deserve or earn, but they get it anyway. I have zero worry that the Spokane Police Department would ever misuse a sit and lie ordinance. Zero. And so, if people need to be moved along and encouraged to go get services, get inside, get a shower, talk to someone about housing, mental health, substance abuse counseling, that's a good thing to do as long as there's somewhere for them to go. We do ban people from some of our shelters if they misbehave. We believe that criminal activity should be engaged by law enforcement every single time. If someone is sitting on a sidewalk cooking heroin on a spoon, that person should be engaged by law enforcement every single time. If someone is littering, if someone is going to the bathroom outside, if someone is doing vandalism or graffiti, it doesn't matter if they're a chronically street homeless person or one of the 1%ers of Spokane. They should be engaged by law enforcement. We believe in that. We believe in accountability. However, we also want to make sure that people are getting the treatment they need. And that means, again, mental health and substance abuse treatment that needs to be more available in our community. Other things in terms of how we look at the neighbors and downtown, at House of Charity alone, we spend over $500,000 a year simply and only on our neighbors, on security team members, people whose job is only to clean up the neighborhood and the blocks around the House of Charity, people whose only job is to respond to the neighbors, to do repairs, to clean up. That's a lot of money to spend every year. I don't think you'll find a homeless shelter in America that's spending $500,000 a year to try and take care of its neighbors. And even with that, we never get 100% success there. We can clean and power wash the 3 blocks around the House of Charity to the point where it's so clean, you could film a car TV commercial there. And then 10 minutes later, it'll look like the Dave Matthews concert just got out at the Gorge. That's how fast that things can turn with this population, who again, because of their medical illnesses, are not always on their best behavior. And that's a reality that we face. So it's not perfect, but we always attempt to try and give that same dignity we give to clients to our neighbors. Even with that, we still have to ask ourselves a lot of hard questions. And here are some of the questions. First of all, are we attracting the homeless? It's a reasonable question. You shouldn't feel bad about asking that question. I don't ever shame anyone for asking that question. It's reasonable. And the reality is we use data. The city point in time count is pretty close to our own data at the House of Charity, that about 80% of the folks that we're serving at the House of Charity were born within 70 miles of downtown Spokane. Now, it depends on what you think is not from here. Maybe Airway Heights is not from here, or the Valley, or maybe it's another state that's not from here. But that data we get from the point in time count, but also we stand with a clipboard a couple times a year at the lunch line at the House of Charity. We ask everybody 2 questions. Where were you born? And if you weren't born here, how long have you lived here? And that's where we get that about 80% number that's reflected also in the point in time count. However, when I talk to police officers, I heard Darren on a previous Zoom talk about, he talked to 75 homeless people, 73 of them were not from Spokane. I hear that all the time. And so we look into that. Like, we wonder, why is that? Because our data is telling us one thing, but I've talked to police officers who say, hey, I ran into 15 new homeless people. They all said they were from Salt Lake City. So we ask homeless people, hey, can you help us understand that? And here's what we hear from the homeless population. When they get approached by a police officer or a community member who just wants to have a conversation or give them a sandwich, and the first question they get asked is, where are you from? Even if they're from Spokane or from around here, they're never going to say that. And here's why. Because if you are mentally ill or substance abusing or homeless, you are in a very vulnerable, traumatic spot. You don't necessarily want to run into anyone you know. And in Spokane, we're a small enough town that if you start a conversation with Darren under the bridge, and after about 5 minutes, it's going to come out, well, where'd you go to school? Where'd you play Little League? Who was your teacher in the 7th grade? Well, gosh, I grew up in that neighborhood, and there's going to be a connection. And now all of a sudden, that homeless person is going to feel even worse. That now this person maybe knew me when I was a kid, or their parents knew me, or there's some connection. So that it's easier for them to say, hey, I'm from Alabama, I'm from Texas, when in fact, maybe they're not. And really, the reality for us, to be completely honest on this topic, again, going back to human dignity, anyone who comes to House of Charity and says, I'm hungry, I need a bed, I need to do my laundry, I need to take a shower, we're going to say yes. And it doesn't matter much to us if you're from Spokane or Syracuse or Syria. We're going to say yes. Now, do we want to necessarily have the word out in the U.S.? The food is so good at the House of Charity, and there's so many free apartments at Catholic Charities in Spokane that you ought to come from Florida and Georgia. We don't necessarily want that. We also don't necessarily think that's happening, and the data doesn't show that. But it's a fair question. It's an okay question to ask, and it's an okay concern to have. Another fair question: are we enabling people? And that's one I get all the time. We have 5 different shelters at Catholic Charities. 4 of them are just like the Union Gospel Mission, in that you have to be clean and sober to get through the front door. 0 tolerance for drugs and alcohol. But we have one, the House of Charity, where we are a low barrier shelter. We take anybody in any condition as long as they respect the staff, the facility, and the rules. And that means if someone's not ready, willing, or able to stop drinking or stop using or go on their meds for mental health, that we still give them the dignity of a bed and a meal and a shower. And there's some controversy around that, because are we enabling them? Absolutely we are. There's no doubt about that. We're enabling their human dignity, because when you're struggling with medical illnesses like mental health and substance abuse, you still should deserve basic human dignity. And yes, we don't want you to keep using or drinking. We do want you to go on your meds for mental health and get a better life. Of course we want that. We have staff in the House of Charity whose job is to connect people with those services. But in the meantime, some people just aren't ready yet. Every single person on this Zoom has someone in your family or in your work group or in your life that has struggled with mental health or addiction. And you know from experiencing them that sometimes people aren't ready yet to get help or willing to accept help. And that's a really tough one, because we still want to give them that human dignity. But yes, that's a fair question. Are we enabling them? Are there too many services in downtown Spokane for the homeless, and is it making it worse? Again, a totally fair question, a reasonable question. We have services in downtown because our homeless population, the chronic street homeless population, isn't very mobile. They don't have cars. They don't have a way to get around. They have to be close to things like the hospital and to go to court on their appearances, or to get mental health or substance abuse treatment, or to get food, or to get shelter. And so in downtown, yes, the House of Charity is downtown. That site, I built the House of Charity shelter 21 years ago on a site that was chosen for us by the city of Spokane. We looked at 5 or 6 different sites. That's the one the city wanted us to put it on. We agreed, so we built the House of Charity. And then what did we do? Well, we built some housing, and that's another fair question. There's too much density of homeless housing downtown around the House of Charity. That's a fair question. So let's look at data. There's 10,027 units, residential units in the downtown core. That comes from the city existing conditions report. 250 out of 10,027 are Catholic Charities apartments for chronically street homeless. So it's about 2.49%. That's 250 units out of 10,000. They're around the House of Charity for a reason, because that's where folks come for services to stay stable and keep them in that housing. When we first built the first one of these, Father Bachhaven, right next door to the House of Charity, we told the city that our plan was to build 4 of those pretty close to the House of Charity. We've now built 4 of those pretty close to the House of Charity. We have no plans to build more. But it is around the House of Charity for a specific reason. There's no doubt about that. And I think that's an important thing when you talk about housing first, which means we're putting people in apartments that maybe are still actively engaged in mental health, addiction, and other struggles. But once we get them into housing, the expectation is you're going to get services. And we have a pretty good success rate. 87% of the people who move into our haven properties, our homeless housing properties, 87% end up engaging in services, mental health, substance abuse, case management. 93% of the people who move into those units for single homeless, chronically street homeless adults, 93% have what HUD defines as a success. The success rate means 2 years later, they're still in that housing. They haven't gone back to jail. They haven't gone back to the streets. They haven't gone back to the shelter. 93% success rate. My son comes back from school with a 93. I'm pretty happy. But the reality is, and this is reasonable, again, we don't really talk about the 93% in the media, in the community, on campaign trails. We talk about the 7%. Because when our folks fail, they fail spectacularly. They fail, and it involves the police and the fire department and the newspaper, and sometimes really awful, scary things when those 7% fail. And so that gets the highlight, that gets the discussion. But really, the truth of the matter for us in housing, our chronically homeless housing is a very small amount of what we do. We have 1,400 units of housing. 246 of them are for chronic street homeless single adults. The rest of those 1,400 units are seniors, families, farm workers, veterans, the disabled. The vast majority of our homeless properties for people coming out of homelessness are for families. Gonzaga Haven, which you see being built right now next door to G Prep, that's for families. Most of what we do is for families. We have 279 kids living in our housing for people coming out of homelessness, and 239 parents of those kids, compared to 246 single adults. And so, really, when we, I forgot to advance my slide, but really when we talk about the housing, what we're talking about is when we build a property, we intend to build the nicest building on the block every time. We spend a lot of money to do that. We use tax credits, and it's important for us that these buildings are maintained, they're clean, they're highly staffed, they're monitored all the time, and they look good. And so that's always our commitment. These are our single adult chronic street homeless properties. These are the ones you see around the House of Charity. And if you go in them on any day of the week, you're going to see a clean building inside and outside. Now, are people congregating around in front of them? Yeah, it's a problem. When we move someone into one of these apartments, the first thing that they do is they feel tremendously guilty because they just got an apartment and their 6 or 7 buddies still on the street didn't get one. So what do? They try to invite their 6 and 7 buddies to come in and sleep on their floor. We have to avoid that. And then there's a line of people outside the building who are knocking and calling on the call box to try and get in. Some of those people are trying to get in for bad reasons, to sell drugs or to traffic people. So we have to have a lot of security, a lot of cameras, a lot of staff. And we do everything we can, again, to make those buildings safe. But certainly it's not a perfect situation. Homelessness is a super hard issue. It's a heart-wrenching, gutting issue emotionally. And we're not always going to agree on all of this. But I always want to, put it out there that it's about the dignity of every human person. People should eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom indoors. But we also have to have dignity and respect for our businesses, our neighbors, for local economies, whether it's in Spokane or Pasco or Chewelah or Omak. We have to be cognizant of that, and we're always willing to have that conversation. So I'll stop talking. Probably went too long, but I'm happy to take questions as well. And I'll stop sharing the screen here.
Well, Rob, I want to thank you personally for coming out here today to answer questions. Oftentimes, I think that's the biggest challenge, is that people see buildings from the outside and don't really understand much about what's going inside. So hopefully and your participation in this group is certainly focused on making things better, especially fixing the optics of what we're seeing in downtown Spokane. Chad, what's the next step on our agenda here today? Where are we going to go next?
We'll go over to Sheldon Jackson, and he's just you're gonna touch on what he's been doing over the last month and what Johnny Perkins actually responded to. So Sheldon, do you want to take it? I think Jesse can share.
Sure. So about a month ago, decided to look at the entrances to Spokane downtown. And we have really 3 major entrances that they're kind of based on the bridges. That would be the Maple Street entrance, which is also the Monroe Street. Also, we have the Division Street entrance. And so what I do every morning, I get up early and I start at Walnut and I-90. And then move through down 4th, take a look at the Monroe Street area. There's a water detention park that's right below the Ronald McDonald House. I move off into Division, shoot down Division, then come up Brown. And the only one on this list that is not part of what a tourist would see or a new business coming into town is the City Gate block, because it's been such a problem. And what I want to tell you here is started a month ago, and there's been a dramatic positive improvement to these areas. What Rob said is very important. It's never going to be perfect. We can clean this thing up 1 minute, and the next minute it could become a disaster. But if you just continue to do it day after day after day after day, it looks better, and it does look better, but it will never be perfect. And we just have to understand it won't be perfect, but we are making an effort. City's making an effort to make this work. I want to kind of add something in about Johnny Perkins, our new city administrator. He reached out to me last week and asked if he could do a ride-along. He went through this list. He had already directed his staff to work on each one of these spots every day. And he went through the list with me, and we went by every single one of these properties. And so he is making an effort. He is making the effort, and the city is making the effort to clean these spots every single day. Now, what I would encourage everyone else out there to do is to make your own list of hot spots. Once we have our entrance to Spokane under control, let's go ahead and start working on other items. The last thing, and there's one more thing on my list here. Everybody that supported the stadium, thank you very much. Pretty impressive. USL is in town. Came in last night. They'll be here for a couple days. And it's nice to have a good-looking city cleaned up for them. Also on my list, I would like to ask everyone to look at a series being done in Portland. This is a series that is being done by the newspaper and a TV station. I think it's KOIN. On, can they save Portland? And one of the most important statements that I heard in this, or I guess it was a quote, was from a San Diego service provider. And they said, they came to Portland and they said that the problem with Portland was misplaced compassion and tolerance. So what does that mean to me? To me, that means misplaced compassion. I think sometimes compassion can be more damaging than not doing anything. And if it's misplaced, I think we need to understand that compassion sometimes is not the best thing. And the other one is tolerance. Are we tolerant of, it seems to me that we're becoming more and more tolerant of a lower standard in our communities. Drugs, crime, garbage, graffiti. Is this the new standard? I mean, are we willing to let this be our new standard in Spokane? Because I'm not. I don't want this to be our new standard in Spokane. This visible garbage, graffiti, everything. So we just have to understand as a community, is this our standard? Is this our new standard, or do we want something better? And if we want something better, then we can't be tolerant of graffiti, garbage. I mean, and all these things that are going on there. Rob stated it. They're not tolerant. Follow his lead. Catholic Charities is not tolerant of all these things that are going on in our community. Let's make sure that we're not tolerant either. That's all I have. Thanks.
All you, Darren.
Ready to go. So here we go. Let me share the screen with you real quick. So basically, I'm here to talk to you about what we're seeing in the housing market. As you know, for some time, we have been, the realtors have been talking quite a bit about housing in Spokane. And we've been very concerned that in recent months, there have been a number of housing reports issued through Spokane that really seemed very low to us. Basically, it boils down to the city came back with a report that said we only need about 360 homes a year, where we're seeing the demand numbers very high. So what we did is we got together this group of experts from across the country and the region to take a look at what Spokane's true housing needs and where our shortfalls are. And the goal was just to create a more accurate picture for Spokane. I want to show you, this is where housing is, and this is the number on the far side for this is the median price housing for Spokane County. So today, in April of 2021, I should say that number is incorrect. 2021, the number is $356,000. What that represents, it represents about a 92% increase just since 2016. In hard dollars, that means the house you could buy for $195,000 back in 5 years ago is today worth close to $165,000 more. The biggest reason for that is supply and demand. In February of 2010, there was 2,300 homes every month for sale. Today, we're down to about 164. It's been a 94% increase. This is the number that Rob McCann alluded to. What that triggers is we did our study and realized that half the people currently living in rentals are actually trying to buy a house. Well, if you can't buy a house, you're staying in that temporary housing. And that housing, that rental housing, is now becoming very bottleneck for people who just can't find a home. The findings, I'm just going to give you some of the highlights. We have underbuilt in this community some 32,000, this should say housing units, that includes multifamily and all that, in the last 10 years. As a result, we've lost out on huge economic opportunity, not only in wages and income, but ongoing and immediate tax revenues. This has now triggered a lack of inventory with thousands of families, thousands in our community, who cannot find a place to buy. As a result, vacancies are low. It is the biggest lack of inventory, which lies especially in that workforce housing, or that lower end housing, the bottom of the ladder, as we call it. And why is that important? Well, that's because those are folks who are trying to get out of their rental situation. And as they try to save up and move out, we're just moving the goalpost every month. And year to year, we are looking at a 29% increase in pricing in Spokane from last year. And this is where people start getting hurt. We are now seeing people suffering as a result of our lack of housing. And Vange Hockheimer, who put this together from Whitworth College, was truly just terrifying. From family stress, school, homelessness, yes, homelessness. Rob McCann will tell you that, and other experts will say that the traditional pathway towards homelessness is one that includes a pathway of trauma, of drug use and bad choices, and then eventually homelessness. In Spokane, Vange Hockheimer has identified that in many cases, that model is actually reversed. That the first step may actually be the homelessness, the loss of housing. You know, I think about this all the time. Union Gospel Mission graduates about 100, 200 people trying to find housing. And these are not people with great records. They've had a storied past, but for 2 years, they've been clean, sober, working in temporary housing. And now they're out trying to compete for a house against people like you and me. It's just, there is no inventory and no place to go. Spokane also is now becoming one of the highest cost burden cities in the country, which is sad because for years, we were actually one of the most affordable. We are now, if you want to add to the problem, guess what? As bad as we think things are, people living on the West Coast think we're great. In Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, San Francisco, Los Angeles, the National Association of Realtors have identified 2 places in the entire country, on the West Coast that is. The top 10 markets, there's 2 on the West Coast that everybody wants to flee to. Scottsdale, Arizona, and Spokane, Washington. And already we're seeing that. While this number of growth is expected, the 48,000 by the year 2030, we may be underrepresenting that by a tremendous amount, and let me tell you why. We're already seeing about 8,000 people a year moving to this area, and that's 2018 data, more than we expected. Right now, the number of people looking at Realtor.com to try to find a place here has increased almost 200-fold. And right now, this week, the last 6 weeks of home sales in the Spokane County region, almost 1 in 5 homes have been bought for cash. Now, we've seen a transition in the economy, right? Where people were doing more to work from home. COVID has rapidly increased that. They've made huge, we're up to about half of the people in Spokane right now are working from home. And that's what people on the West Coast are saying. Why would I live in Seattle to pay these prices when I can buy a home there, even if I have to outbid it by 50,000, 100,000? So we may see 8 to 14,000 new residents annually, and that may be on the low side. Some of the final ones, we're now seeing a shift where, because the group's consensus was, because of housing regulations specific to the city of Spokane, most new housing is now being created where there is no growth management. There is no over in Kootenai County. In fact, new numbers that came out this week from the Department of Transportation show that we've increased the number of people commuting into the city from Kootenai County by 25%. Each one of them carries about a 4 metric tons per year of greenhouse gas. We have local public policy has reduced and restricted building. This is a consensus of our experts. And this is the final one, that in a final review of the 20-year plan wrapped around centers and corridors, there has not been a single development happen. People point to Kendall Yards. Well, what about Kendall Yards? That had nothing to do with centers and corridors, and in fact, had to be set aside as its own separate PUD in order to make that happen. Now, why is Kendall Yards something to think about? Because it has all the elements when we start talking about infill and density, how to add more houses into the same space. It's got apartments, it's got condominiums, it's got townhomes, it has light retail, it has walkability, all of those elements that we like, and yet in 85% of the city, you cannot build a Kendall Yards. So as we start talking about the changes we are making in where we live and what we have to do now to start rethinking how we live and how we can find more room for our children and for our neighbors and for our relatives, we really have to start thinking about how we build housing and where. At the same time, if you want to follow every month, if you want to take a look at where housing is at, we put this report out every month. It's on the front of our website at SpokaneRealtor.com. And I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And would love to, if you have any questions, please feel free to email. And in fact, Rob, I think you said at the beginning as well, if anybody here in the group has questions for you specifically, can we email you directly as well?
Absolutely. Rob,
please put your email in the chat box and we'll see how we can follow up.
Well, hey, Darren, thank you. Great presentation. To get the report, I emailed out part of it, but it's it's such a large file that it's hard to, a lot of servers will reject it. Is there an easy way to get that report?
You know what, why don't I find a way to post it on our website and I will get you a copy. I hate to run out. We're getting a chance to interview the Planning Commission candidates here at 10 o'clock, and I wanted to be part of that. I appreciate your time here today, Chud. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Darren. Good luck on the interview. And I'm looking to see if Gordon Hester, are you still on?
I am.
Okay, great. So Gordon Hester is President Kimberly Haygood, and in the property managers right now are the ones that are seeing some crazy trends, and they manage several of the Hutton settlement properties, and so they know firsthand what's going on. Gordon, I was hoping Gordon could share just some trends that are going on out there. Is it, what's going on? Is it getting better? Is it getting more challenging? But Gordon, I'm going to turn it to you.
Sure, and I'll be brief. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So we had, over the last 12 months, we've increased security spending in our buildings, particularly in the downtown area, over $100,000 a year. And these are in buildings where the occupancy is currently less than 50% because we still have a lot of our businesses working from home. And the reason behind that is that what we are finding is not just homeless people on the streets, but aggressive criminal and drug activity that's starting to spill over inside of the buildings. And just last week, in one day, we had 7 people we had to kick out of the Chase building, and we had one that had wandered into someone's lunchroom and sat down and made himself lunch and then proceeded to go out in the lobby and use the lobby as a bathroom. And I don't know what the reason is, but it is a big increase in the traffic moving from the streets into the buildings. So we've increased security patrols everywhere and increased our own staff patrols trying to get these people out of the buildings. The other challenge we're seeing is that for our businesses that are coming back into the office buildings and trying to bring workers back, they've now realized they've gone a year without having to be downtown. And we're seeing a lot of sentiment. We're actually a couple of the actual business saying, you know what, we're either not coming back or we're moving to the valley or we're going somewhere else. And that trend is a little startling for me, knowing how hard it is to turn that ship around once people start deciding that downtown is not safe and that the hassle of the increased security and everything is more than they want to deal with their business. They're going to leave and they're going to Coeur d'Alene and they're going to the valley. And I'm very fearful for what that trend looks like 12 months from now and whether we're going to be able to bring those businesses back downtown at all. But we're seeing that pretty aggressively over the last 45 to 60 days, people saying, we're just not renewing our lease, we're moving.
Thank you for sharing. And I know for those that are downtown, and a lot of us are on there that are still downtown, it is changed. There wasn't one day I didn't not go into the office last year, but you could just see it, the lack of activity down there, the healthy activity. It seemed like it brought out the uglier activity. So that's what I've seen, and that's sort of why we're here. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to respect our time, but I also want to respect our elected officials that are on here as well. And I know that both Council Member Betsy Wilkerson and Council Member Michael Cathcart are on. And I don't know if you want to add just anything. We appreciate you being here. This is a long hour to sit here. I know it's just not another Zoom you need, but Betsy, anything you want to add in? Appreciate you being on. Thank you.
So thank you. I know Michael put something in the chat around his comments, so please read those. I just want to thank Rob and Darren. I've talked with both of them and the challenges are huge. One thing I do want to mention is there is money for addiction. There's very little money for recovery services. And that's where a lot of this work with our homeless has to happen. So that's where we could lean in on our elected state officials. I do want to say that with Johnny Perkins on board, we have really taken on what we're going to do to start with is putting more garbage cans downtown. We realize the homeless use disposable things, paper cups, boxes, and they're not going to walk to the nearest garbage can that could be 4 or 5 blocks. They're just going to drop it where they have it. So that is the first step that we can do. We had a study session about bathrooms. We'll see where that conversation goes. There's a lot of pushback on that, some from the administration side, but that is a bodily function and we have to acknowledge that going forward. I will keep you posted on those American Recovery Act dollars. We're looking at some backfill for the city, but really some initiatives that could move the needle in the city. And a part of that could be played with some of our downtown homeless issues. So I'm excited about that. Last thing, big celebratory for the stadium. Council and Mayor, Council President Beggs and myself was glad to play a part in that, a small one I might add, but we support that and we support downtown businesses. So I'm excited about these conversations, and all I heard was the intersectionality of our challenges, whether they are people who have resources or people who don't have resources. They all need a home. So thanks again. And with that, I'm going to scoot, but always reach out to me. I'd be glad to respond.
All right, thank you, Betsy, for joining us and sharing those. We agree with you. Please know that reach out to us too if you have questions or if there's anything that you're like, I'm concerned with something that, because as we're working right now, we're working towards a draft with recommendations. We presented some last month and we've been waiting with the different stakeholders. I'm hoping at the June meeting, we can come up with a list that we want to go forward with and be able to present to the city of Spokane, Spokane County, and the Valley of Spokane. I mean, it's a regional quality of life issue that we all are in it together. And I believe that, as like Rob said, I've shared, there's much more in common than not. And I think it's the conversation that counts that gets us to that point to find the common pieces that I think we can pull together and start working on. So with that, I want to add, anybody want to add anything? I don't want to just cut you off because I was hoping to have some forum time here to discussion, but we ran out of time. If there's no other comments, I know that Jonathan Malahan and Rob, there are several questions, and Jonathan's doing a great job trying to stay up with those in chat. If there's any more that you have, send Rob or Jonathan an email. You have my email address, so you can also send them to me and I can forward them on. But let's keep the dialogue going. I appreciate it. It takes us all. Thank you. And I'll have to say aloha, mahalo, all those Hawaiian words. Anyways, thank you. Thank you all for being part of it. Have a good day.